who needs the Beatles in 2025?
Well, that was a question that was often asked in the past couple of months after this release was announced, the Beatles Anthology 4 or the Anthology Collection, and there was some debate and some controversy around this release, that this is a cash grab, that this is scratching the bottom of the barrel, that these are the last leftovers, which they are not. As Beatles fans, we know there are still other tracks like the infamous Carnival of Light. Who needs this? I mean, the question, who needs the Beatles? Everyone needs the Beatles, and now more than ever, of course. But who needs this release would be the proper question, I would say. Personally, I'm happy that this exists. I can understand the criticism that at first it was announced as this 4 CD box set that you had to buy, the complete thing. But they saw their wrongs, the Apple people, and now CD4 with the new tracks can also be bought separately. I pre-ordered this as a 4 CD box set, and I didn't cancel my order when it was announced that CD4 will be also released as an individual release, because I'm a Beatle completist, so I would buy everything always.
As you're just saying you're a Beatles completist, do you think this would be of any use for somebody who is not totally into the Beatles yet? I mean, for a starter, this is rather useless.
Well, this is the thing. I think Apple, the company, they think this is the right starting kit in a way. After the original albums or Red and Blue album, this should be the next thing to buy in the imagination of the Apple people, because that was the reason why this was initially planned as a 4 CD box set for young people who weren't around in the 90s and who never had the Anthology 1, 2, 3. That was the reason. This is really aimed at the what are they called? Generation. What's the generation now?
Why? I don't know.
Those people with the short attention spans.
Yeah.
But this was the TikTok generation. Yeah. This is for them. So now all the old geezers on the internet, those 40, 50, 60-year-old people are all like, this release, this isn't for us, this isn't for the fans. And they're right, they're not the target audience. At Apple, they know that us nerds, we're going to buy it anyway, and they aim it at the young people.
But that is interesting, because I would have thought that the Anthology series is rather a collector's thing with different versions, right? These are always it's not the actual studio version, it's like close to a studio version. So this would
it's like demos and an early takes, alternate takes of things. There's also live footage. It's a mishmash of all those things. But I think that the initial anthology from the 90s is brilliant. I was a really big fan. I listened non-stop to especially Anthology 2, which covers 1965 to 1968. Those are the most interesting. And the big criticism about Anthology 4, the new set now, is that it's 1 CD with which starts with I Saw Her Standing There from 1963 and it ends in 1969 or something.
Mm-hmm. The time span is not really logical.
Well, they should have spread it out. That's what people criticize. They should have spread it out on those 3. They should have maybe they would have needed to have 4 double CDs, but they should have the new tracks, the newly unreleased tracks, should have been, the 1963 track should have been put on Anthology 1, and then, the 65 phase on Anthology 2, and 1969 on Anthology 3, and then Anthology 4. So
which would benefit also coming from the name, right? Because if you name it Anthology, people expect it to be something in a...
So that's why people say this isn't really planned out in a meaningful way, and it smells like a cash grab in a way. And that's the problem with Apple in general. I think since Neil Aspinall died, who was the close confidant of the Beatles in the 60s, their roadie, he was the head of Apple for like 30 years, and then 15 or 20 years ago he died. And since then it's really very, people who just see working for Apple as a career move, like corporate yuppies who make the decisions, and they don't really understand the Beatles, in a way that a real fan or someone like Neil Aspinall, who was one of those 150 Beatle persons around, they don't get it, and that's why there are so many questionable decisions made. Also, the new mixes of there are the songs "Free as a Bird," "Real Love," and "Now and Then." The new songs, and they have been remixed by Giles Martin, and that's I hate Giles Martin. All those box sets in the previous years. That's what really started after Neil Aspinall passed away. All those Sgt. Pepper Deluxe box set, White Album Deluxe box set. There's always these Giles Martin remixes on there, and they are always terrible. And there are so many people, especially also YouTubers, Beatle YouTubers, who are defending them and say, "Oh, that's nice to finally a great mix of the White Album." And I don't understand. The Beatles were the biggest band in the world ever because they had the best mixes ever in the world. There was never anything wrong with the White Album. There weren't people around in 1968 who were like, "Oh, those awful mixes of the White Album." The Beatles became the biggest band of the world for a reason, because they had great productions. So just because he's the son of George Martin, he gets to do all those remixes, and he destroys almost everything he touches. And
why do you feel so uncomfortable? Can you make it a little bit more specific? Do you think it sounds too sterile or too sharp, or what is it?
No, it's amateurish. It sounds like someone who really doesn't understand his job. I mean, first of all, like I said, they don't need remixing.
Okay.
There are maybe 4 or 5 songs where it's debatable, where you could say, okay, they are mixed badly. But even then, it's historical. I think you shouldn't really touch it, for at least in an official, canonized way. You can make a fan remix if you want, but to really put it out as canonized, this is the new Beatles. This is how the Beatles are supposed to sound. I mean, George Harrison would really hate to see those remixes. George Harrison didn't even like the Beatles on CD, when they just put the original mixes on CD in 1987. George Harrison was like, "This sounds like shit." Now you can hear things that we wanted to bury in the mix, and now they are so crystal clear, and now it doesn't sound good anymore. He would really hate those very radical and very poorly done Giles Martin remixes. So first of all, you don't need any remixes, except Apple need it because they want to make money, but it's very short-sighted. If they would really have a long strategy, they wouldn't remix those things. They would do much fewer, much less. They would put out much. They wouldn't put out new Beatle product every year. That's like inflation. It diminishes the value of the things. In the 70s there were 2 official best-ofs, the Red and the Blue album. And that was all that was needed, and it made lots of money. But now they put out like 2 or 3 things every year, things no one needs, and they sell less and less of it, because finally people, notice that it's absolutely not needed. And those new mixes of especially Real Love, it's finally people waking up to this. There's lots of controversy on YouTube channels, Beatle fan channels, that the new Real Love mix is so terrible. And I agree, it's terrible. But all those other remixes of the Revolver album and so on, White Album, they were all terrible. So that's really the thing where people notice that something's wrong with Apple. But on the positive side now, I still like this release, and I'm happy with this release, because the really new tracks, the tracks that weren't on any bootlegs as far as I know, and that haven't been released previously, I really like those. So I think if you're a Beatle fan, with all that what I have just said, you still, if you're really a Beatle fan, you should go out and buy Anthology 4. You should maybe understand that it's a very cynical release by Apple, but that doesn't change the fact that there's versions on here of All You Need Is Love and Baby You're a Rich Man, In My Life, Nowhere Man. It's fantastic. So those are all fantastic versions of those songs, and as a Beatle completist and as someone who loves the Beatles, it's fantastic to have those songs. So I don't understand that part of the criticism of this release, that so-called Beatle fans are saying like, who needs those tracks? I would love to have every single take they ever recorded. I would have loved this to be even more expanded. If there's such a thing as Anthology, and I'm glad there is, then they should have made maybe like a 20 CD super deluxe box. They should have made a 4 CD box set for the casual listeners, but they should have made really the very big one, but with no remixes on it. Then it would be an honest release. This is everything we have in our archive, and for me as a completist, I really like to listen to those, and especially All You Need Is Love. This is a fantastic version that I and I think most people on this planet have never heard before, and this alone, I think, despite all the criticism, makes this a worthwhile release for me.
Earlier on, you said that George might not have liked this.
He would have hated it.
So the question is, what does Paul think about it? Since he's the only one that.
I think he's at the point he's too old to really care about it. I think Paul McCartney from 20, 30 years ago would have opposed many of those decisions, because not just because he's like a custodian of a guardian of the Beatle world, that would be one aspect, but also because he's a clever businessman in a way, and I think the Paul McCartney of 30 years ago would have understood that this really diminishes, long term, and Paul was always very long term thinker. In the long term releases like this, the way they are handled, like I said, not the release in principle, but the way this release is handled, it diminishes the legacy of the Beatles. And I think Paul McCartney was always about, I want my legend, my legacy to be, in 200 years I want people still to be fans of the Beatles and so on, and John Lennon as well in a way. And George Harrison, George Harrison was always the purist when it came to these things, and was always very much anti, those inflationary cash grab releases, which is also a bit sad because his estate, the people who take care of his posthumous releases of his solo albums, they also don't really seem to care about what he would have preferred, with very strange remixes and deluxe box sets, overpriced deluxe box sets. So it's in a bit of a sad phase, and I think the market will now get oversaturized so much that at one point it will go back, but maybe the damage will be too much then.
Earlier on you said that it feels a little bit like, I think you said, scratching the barrel or something like that. Would it have been more elegant not to call it Anthology 4, but to call it Anthology The Last Breadcrumbs, in an ironic way, to signalize?
Well, that wouldn't be an Apple move, and that wouldn't be Beatle-like.
Okay, I see.
What the Beatles. Yeah. This would be something that the Rolling Stones maybe would do.
Yeah,
But the Beatles always, that wouldn't fit with the Beatles to make such a release. But really, I think they should have made. Nothing wrong with this. It's not 4 CDs. It's 8 CDs, because those are double CDs. Nothing wrong with the 8 CD release, but they should have left off those remixes of the Friedel songs of Free as a Bird, Real Love and Now and Then, and they should have, like I said, spread out the Anthology 4 tracks onto Anthology 1, 2, 3, so that it would be chronological. Then this would be a fine release for casual fans, and I think for the super fans, they should have really given us basically everything they could give us, including Carnival of Light and all those still unreleased songs. And what also was criticized often is that there's lots of songs that were already released on box sets. On Anthology 4 there's lots of outtakes of songs that were already on the Revolver box set, the White Album box set. I have no problem with these. I think if you call it anthology, it should be the complete picture. So I don't have any problem that there's some overlaps, because if those are great outtakes, then put it on anthology. But if they go that route, and they went that route, then like I said, for a super deluxe box set, they should have given us much, much more, so that it would really be a complete anthology, and then it would be really a big release that even non-Beatle fans would care about. In the 90s when Anthology came out, it's created lots of new Beatle fans, because it was like a worldwide event, like discovering the Beatles. But this is really just this is just for the fans now,
for the nerds, actually.
because it's so it's so unremarkable in the way it was handled. But if you make it really big, like now you're getting the complete stuff, there will be no more. This already is like a secret wink in a way, like in 10 years we're going to make Anthology 5 and you will give us your money again. And
because then we will put on the Carnival of Light.
And in 20 years Anthology 6 we found something else. But if you really would have wanted to make this big for this new generation, then you would have then the ACD box set, okay, for the short attention span people, but also here's 40 CDs and it costs 1,500 euros or something, and now you have everything. Then it would be a big release, and then even media outside of Beatle nerd media would talk about this. But this is really, from a marketing perspective, and especially also of course from an artistic point of view, kind of disappointing. But like I said, I'm such a big fan and such a completist that I'm personally still happy to have at least 3, 4, 5 songs that are great that I hadn't heard in these versions before. So that's, I'm torn between negative and positive. The positive side of me says I'm so glad that I can listen to this version of All You Need Is Love and so on, Nova Man in my life. And the negatives, I just talked about it, all the other stuff.
David Baldinger, who you also know, recently told me that he talked to the guy that made the covers for Anthology 1, 2, 3, and
Klaus Forman.
And that
Klaus
Forman? And that Klaus did not know about a number 4, and that he was totally irritated that they took a collage of the first 3 as the cover. It's interesting.
That's so typical. That's a very interesting info. That's so typical with everything that goes wrong with Apple and Giles Martin. These people don't really care about the inner core people. Those are corporate people, and including Giles Martin. He's just lucky that he's the son of George Martin, and he looks a bit like him, and he has the same family name. That's the reason why he gets to do these things. But he doesn't. It doesn't seem to me like he has an emotional connection to people like Klaus and Neil, who passed away, but who should be like a beacon for everyone who works at Apple. Those people should be the go-to people. Those who are still alive, like Klaus, should be go-to people. Hey Klaus, what do you think about this?
Yeah.
Do you have ideas for the cover artwork or something like that? But this doesn't happen. And all those remix box sets, it smells like that. It's like that there wasn't really much care put into it. And the remixes by Giles Martin are the most obvious sign of this. Remixes with so little care, with so little empathy, or remixes that don't get the vibe of what the Beatles and his father George Martin intended when they recorded it, and what they want. They wanted certain sounds to be in the foreground, and they wanted other sounds to be in the background. He doesn't get those subtle details, and this is just this is the remix side, the audio side, but it transcends everything. It goes into the artwork. This is the Klaus Forman thing. It goes into the marketing. It doesn't really feel like a Beatle release. For the young people now, they don't care because they weren't around in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. But for people like us, and I imagine for like 70-year-old people even more so, this feels so alien. It doesn't feel like a Beatle release. This feels like a bootleg release in a way. If this would be a bootleg that I bought on a flea market, I would say, wow, this is nicely done, nice artwork and so on. But this is official. It's like I said, I like to listen to some outtakes, and I don't regret buying this. But as an official release, it's still embarrassing in a way.
You have already said that you doubt that Paul was very much involved.
I think he's too old to care now.
And this all obviously also counts for Ringo, right? Because Ringo even less, I don't know.
I think Ringo never really cared about these details. I think for Ringo it's always a payday when something gets released by the Beatles. You know, this is the way he makes most of his money. And so he doesn't object. I think he doesn't want to complicate things. He just wants those things to be put out, and fair enough. You know, why not? You know, it's understandable. But Paul, you know, Paul was always someone who was really on a businessman side, but also on an artistic and caretaker side, very involved in all those things. And John and George as well. You know, John and George would have hated it. Paul should hate it, but is too old. I mean, it's cool that he's still around playing live, but I think that those 3-hour shows he does every night distract him a bit from, you know, actually caring about this stuff. But again, it's also understandable in a way, and he's 80. He's 83 now, and Ringo is Ringo, you know.
Philosophical question. Since this obviously is a release for the nerds, more or less, or at least that's the main target group.
Well, no, the target group is the young people and everyone, but it's the nerds that end up buying it.
I doubt that very much.
No. The target group of Apple, you know, that's why I say it's bad marketing. They want to sell it not just to the nerds, but the nerds are the idiots that end up buying it.
Yes.
We're the only ones buying it, and we're complaining about it. And that's bad marketing, because Apple thought, now we can bypass the nerds who are always critical. We will make this for the new generation. But no one from the new generation will buy this.
It's interesting because it's almost feels religious when you say this, because you're saying something like, I hate it, but I love it. It's somehow how people talk about their religion or stuff. I mean, it is, right?
Yeah, or like they talk about the person that they fell in love with. You know, like there's this old poem from the Romance, you know, which is like, I love her and I hate her at the same time. There's this famous poem in Latin, and it's like that, It's like that. I love it and I hate it.
So Beatles nerds just have to buy it. It's not a choice, right?
Yeah. I'm obliged, you know, my member card. I have to give away my member card, my fan member card. My T-shirts, all my shirts, to give them away. But you know, I'm glad. Like I said, and those are the final things I have to say. Believe it or not, I'm glad that I bought it, because like I said, I like to listen to some of the outtakes I wasn't familiar with, and I will always like listening to those outtakes. I just would have wished there would have been more of those, because there are more of those. But the marketing and you know, the whole manner in which this was conceived or created is embarrassing for Apple, and I think they should, they should appoint the job of CEO at one point to someone who really does care about this. Maybe someone who doesn't understand much about, economics and so on, because they can hire other people for that. But they should have, someone like Neil Aspinall. He was a mailman before he joined the Beatles circuit. He was delivering letters to people. But he was, for 30 years, he was CEO of Apple. He didn't need to know anything about marketing and money making. He was just someone who cared about the Beatles. And you need someone like that again. That's all I have to say about that.
So would you apply for that job?
No. I'm busy. I'm busy doing,
You're a liar.
I'm busy doing videos. I'm busy doing videos that 5 people will watch.